I still remember the exact moment everything changed. It was a Tuesday afternoon in November, and I was sitting in my cramped studio apartment in downtown Denver, going through invoices from the small delivery service I'd been running for 3 years. The rain was hitting my window in that persistent way that makes you feel trapped inside your own thoughts. My phone buzzed. A text from my younger brother Marcus. Dad bought me the Mustang GT. Can you believe it? My stomach dropped. Not just any Mustang GT, the exact one I'd been saving for since I was 17. The same deep blue metallic finish, the same performance package, the same model year I'd circled in magazines and bookmarked online countless times. I'd shown Dad that car so many times over the years, talking about how someday I'd own one just like it. How I'd worked double shifts at the warehouse, picked up weekend gigs, saved every spare dollar for 15 years toward that dream. I set my phone down and stared at the stack of bills on my desk. Rent, utilities, business insurance, truck payments for my single delivery vehicle, a beat-up Ford Transit that had seen better days but still got the job done. At 32, I'd been working since I was 17, never asking for handouts, never expecting anything except maybe some recognition for the effort I put in every single day. But recognition? That was apparently reserved for Marcus, who at 28 had bounced between jobs, dropped out of college twice, and still lived in Dad's basement while figuring things out. And now he had my dream car. Gift wrapped with a bow on top. I picked up my phone and called Dad. He answered on the third ring. That familiar gruff voice that had lectured me about responsibility and hard work my entire childhood. Sarah, what's up? Dad, Marcus just texted me about the Mustang. I kept my voice steady, professional. The same tone I used with difficult clients. Yeah, I thought it was time the boy had something nice. He's been having a rough patch, with the job situation and all. A rough patch. That's what we were calling 6 months of unemployment now. Dad, that's the exact car I've been saving for, right? The one we've talked about? There was a pause. I could hear the TV, in the background some sports commentary, filling the silence where an explanation should have been. Sarah, you're doing fine. You've got your business, your independence. Marcus needs this more than you do right now. Those words hit me like a physical blow. I'd built my delivery service from nothing, working 8-hour days, sleeping in my truck between routes, eating gas station sandwiches for dinner more nights than I cared to count. I never asked him for money, never moved back home when things got tough, never expected anything except maybe some acknowledgement that I was trying just as hard as everyone else. I see, I said quietly. Don't be dramatic about this, Sarah. It's just a car. Just a car. 15 years of dreaming, saving, planning dismissed in 4 words. You're right, Dad. It's just a car. I hung up and sat in the growing darkness of my apartment listening to the rain and the distant hum of Denver traffic. My laptop was still open to the spreadsheet I'd been working on profit and loss projections for the next quarter. The numbers were good. Not great, but steady, growing. I'd started Sarah's Swift delivery 3 years ago with a $5,000 loan and that beat-up transit van. Small packages, local businesses, same-day delivery service. Nothing glamorous, but it filled a need in the market, and I was good at it. Reliable. Professional. The kind of person business owners trusted with their urgent shipments and time-sensitive deliveries, but apparently that wasn't enough to earn the same consideration my little brother got just for existing. I opened a new browser tab and searched for Mustang GT for sale Denver. Dozens of listings popped up. I scrolled through them, noting prices, mileage, condition reports. With my current savings and credit, I could probably finance one. It would be tight, but doable. Then I stopped scrolling. Why was I looking at just one car? Why was I still thinking small? I closed the laptop and walked to my window, looking out at the city lights reflecting off the wet streets. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably taking selfies with his new Mustang, posting them on social media with captions about gratitude and family. Meanwhile, I was here alone, as usual, wondering why working hard and asking for nothing had somehow made me worth less in my father's eyes. But maybe that was the Wrong way to think about it. Maybe the problem wasn't that I was worth less, maybe it was that I'd been thinking too small all along. I picked up my phone and opened my banking app. Between my business account and personal savings, I had more than I'd realized. 3 years of reinvesting profits, living below my means, and building something real had added up. Not enough for a fleet, but enough for something bigger than I'd been dreaming. The next morning, I drove my transit van to the Ford dealership on Colorado Boulevard, the same dealership where Dad had bought Marcus his gift. I asked to speak with a sales manager, not just a regular salesperson. When Jim Rodriguez came out, a middle-aged guy with kind eyes and a firm handshake, I got straight to the point. I need to buy vehicles for my delivery business, multiple vehicles. And I need to understand your fleet pricing. Jim's eyebrows went up slightly. How many vehicles are we talking about? Start with 5. But I want to understand pricing for 10, 15, 20. I'm planning to expand. We spent 2 hours going through options. Transit vans, cargo vans, even some smaller trucks. Jim showed me fleet management software, bulk service packages, extended warranties that made sense for commercial use. By the end of our meeting, I had a comprehensive proposal in hand and a timeline for delivery. Most people start smaller, Jim said as he walked me to my van. But you seem to know what you're doing. I've been planning this for a while. I lied smoothly. The truth was, I'd been planning it for about 12 hours, ever since my father made it clear where I stood in the family hierarchy. That evening, I called my business layer, Jennifer Kim, who'd helped me set up the LLC 3 years ago. She was working late, as usual. Sarah, good to hear from you. How's business? Growing, that's actually why I'm calling. I need to talk about expansion, significant expansion. And I need to understand the implications of bringing on employees.
How
significant are we talking? 5 new vehicles to start. Maybe 10 by the end of next year. I'm thinking about moving from just delivery to full logistics services. Maybe some passenger transport too, depending on licensing requirements. Jennifer was quiet for a moment. That's a big jump from where you are now. You sure you're ready for that kind of overhead? I looked around my small apartment, at the desk where I'd been managing everything myself for 3 years, at the stack of client files that represented dozens of small businesses who trusted me with their urgent needs. Sure. We scheduled a meeting for Friday to go through the paperwork, discuss business structure changes, and plan for hiring. After I hung up, I sat down at my laptop and started researching commercial transportation licenses, logistics management, systems, and employee handbooks. It was nearly midnight when I finally closed the laptop. Tomorrow I'd start the process that would change everything. Not because I was angry but because I'd finally realized something important. I'd been thinking like someone who deserved scraps when I should have been thinking like someone who deserved the whole meal. Dad was right about one thing. It was just a car. But what I was building now, that was going to be so much more. 3 months later, I was standing in the parking lot of a commercial warehouse space in Aurora, watching as the delivery truck dropped off my 5th new van. 5 identical Ford Transit vans, all painted in the deep green and silver livery I'd designed for Swift Transport Solutions, the new name for what had started as Sarah's Swift Delivery. The rebrand had been Jennifer's suggestion. If you're going big, sound big, she'd said during one of our planning meetings. She was right. Swift Transport Solutions sounded like a company that could handle anything from same-day delivery to cross-state logistics, which, as of last week, we could. My phone rang as I was photographing the new vehicles for insurance purposes. It was Maria Santos, my first full-time employee and now my operations manager. Sarah, we just got a call from Denver Medical. They need emergency transport of lab samples to Colorado Springs, and their regular carrier fell through. Can we handle it? I checked my watch. 2:30 p.m. on a Thursday. Colorado Springs was a 2-hour drive in good traffic, 3 hours round trip, plus time for pickup and delivery. One of my new drivers could handle it easily. Absolutely. Get Jake on it, he knows the medical protocols. And make sure they know we can set up a regular contract if they need reliable backup service. Already on it? Oh, and Sarah. The insurance company called back about the passenger transport license. were approved. I felt that familiar surge of satisfaction that came with each small victory. 6 months ago, I'd been running a one-woman operation out of my apartment. Now I had 5 vehicles, 3 full-time drivers, an operations manager, and licenses that let us compete for contracts I couldn't have dreamed of before. The warehouse space was another upgrade I'd made once the business started growing. 1,500 square feet of office and storage space, with enough parking for 10 vehicles and room to expand. It wasn't fancy, but it was professional, and it was mine. Well, technically, it was Swift Transport Solutions. But since I owned 100% of the company, that was the same thing. I walked inside to find Maria coordinating with Jake on the medical transport while simultaneously handling a call from a potential new client. She was incredibly organized, professional, and completely unflappable under pressure. I'd hired her away from a larger logistics company by offering better pay, better benefits, and the chance to help build something from the ground up. "Sarah," she called out after finishing both calls, "I have some news you're going to want to hear." I grabbed a coffee from the machine I'd installed in our small break area and sat down at her desk. "Good news or bad news? Depends on your perspective." I got a call from someone asking about employment opportunities, someone who heard we were hiring drivers. That's good news. We can use another experienced driver. Maria's expression was carefully neutral. It was Marcus. "Your brother Marcus." I nearly choked on my coffee. "What?" "He said he's been out of work for a few months and heard through family that you were expanding. He wanted to know if you had any openings." Marcus. My little brother, proud owner of a brand new Mustang GT, was calling to ask me for a job. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I'd need to discuss it with you and get back to him." I figured this was a conversation you'd want to have yourself. I leaned back in my chair, processing this development. Part of me, the petty part, wanted to laugh out loud. The golden boy who'd gotten the car of my dreams handed to him was now asking his overlooked sister for employment. But the professional part of me, the part that had built this business, was already evaluating him as a potential employee. "What's his driving record like?" I asked. "Clean, as far as I could tell from what he mentioned. He's got a commercial license, apparently. He drove delivery trucks for about 6 months last year before that company downsized." "References?" "He mentioned a couple of previous employers. I can do the usual background check if you want to move forward." I thought about it for a moment. Hiring family was generally considered a bad idea in business. Too much potential for drama, blurred boundaries, conflicts of interest. But Marcus wasn't asking for special treatment, at least, not that I could tell from Maria's report. He was asking for a job, presumably because he needed one. "Set up an interview," I said finally. "Treat him like any other candidate. Full background check, driving record verification, the works. If he meets our standards, we'll consider him." Maria nodded approvingly. "Professional approach, I like it. But Maria? Make sure he understands this is a business, not a family favor. Same expectations as everyone else, same consequences if he doesn't meet them. Understood." The interview was scheduled for the following Tuesday. In the meantime, I had bigger things to focus on. We'd submitted bids for 3 major contracts that could transform the business. A recurring logistics contract with a manufacturing company, a partnership with a medical equipment supplier, and a trial run with the airport for ground transportation services. Any one of those contracts would double our revenue. All 3 would make Swift Transport Solutions a major player in the Denver metro logistics market. Tuesday morning arrived with typical Colorado weather, bright sunshine, and a temperature drop that reminded you it was still technically winter. I decided to conduct Marcus's interview myself. With Maria sitting in to take notes and ask technical questions, he arrived 10 minutes early, which was a good sign. He was dressed professionally, slacks, button-down shirt, tie, and had brought copies of his resume, references, and driving record. He looked nervous, which was also a good sign. It meant he was taking this seriously. We spent the first few minutes on standard interview questions. His work history was spotty but not terrible, a series of jobs that he'd either left or been laid off from. But no firings for cause, no major red flags. His commercial driving experience was limited, but legitimate. Why do you want to work for Swift Transport Solutions? I asked, using the same question I asked every candidate. Marcus shifted in his chair. Honestly? Because I need work, and I heard you're a good employer. Fair, professional, growing company. I want to be part of something that's building up. Not just collecting a paycheck from somewhere that might lay me off next month. It was a good answer. Not perfect, but better than I'd expected. Are you comfortable with the fact that I'd be your boss? I asked directly. Sarah, I know I haven't always been the most reliable family member. I know Dad gave me advantages that maybe I didn't earn. But I'm asking you to judge me on what I can do for your company, not on family history. Another good answer? He was clearly prepared for this conversation. Maria asked him technical questions about route planning, customer service protocols, vehicle maintenance, and emergency procedures. His answers were adequate, not exceptional, but adequate. He understood. The basics of professional driving and logistics work. After he left, Maria and I debriefed. He seemed sincere, she said. And he's right about one thing, we do need another driver. Jake's getting burned out on the long routes, and if we land any of those big contracts, we'll need more coverage. References check out? I called both of his previous supervisors yesterday. One said he was reliable but not particularly ambitious. The other said he was fine but not someone they'd rehire, mainly because they needed someone more proactive. Not exactly glowing recommendations, but not disqualifying either. Here's what I'm thinking, I said finally. Probationary hire. 60 days, same as everyone else gets. Clear expectations, regular check-ins, and if he doesn't work out, he goes. No family drama, no special consideration. Sounds fair. I called Marcus that afternoon to offer him the position. He sounded genuinely grateful, which surprised me. Sarah, I want you to know I won't let you down. I know this is a chance and I'm going to prove I deserve it. Marcus, this isn't a chance, it's a job. Show up on time, do the work professionally, treat customers well, and take care of the equipment. That's all I expect from any employee. Understood. He started the following Monday. By Wednesday, I was questioning my decision. Not because he was doing anything wrong, he was punctual, polite with customers, and careful with the vehicles. But he clearly didn't understand the culture I'd built at Swift Transport Solutions. My other drivers, Jake, Sam, and Patricia, had bought into the idea that we were building something special. They took pride in the company, suggested improvements, went the extra mile for difficult customers. Marcus seemed to view it as just another job, something to do until something better came along. Still, he was competent, and competent was good. Enough while I focused on bigger challenges, like the phone call I received on Friday afternoon from Richard Hartman, CEO of Hartman Manufacturing. Miss Chun, I'm calling about the logistics proposal you submitted. We'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss terms. I felt my heart rate spike. Hartman Manufacturing was the biggest potential contract we'd bid on, recurring shipments between their Denver facility and distribution centers in 5 states. If we landed it, we'd need to triple our fleet size within 6 months. I'd be happy to meet, Mr. Hartman. What time frame works for you? Monday morning, 9 a.m. at our facility.
And
Miss Chun, bring your expansion plans. If we move forward, we'll need to know you can scale quickly. Scale quickly. That meant more vehicles, more drivers, probably a larger facility. It meant taking Swift Transport Solutions from a small local business to a regional operation. It meant betting everything on my ability to deliver on promises I was still figuring out how to keep. After I hung up, I sat in my office looking at the growth projections Maria and I had worked out the previous month. Conservative estimates, aggressive estimates, nightmare scenarios, dream scenarios. All of them seemed inadequate for what was being asked of me now, but I'd learned something important over the past 6 months. I was capable of more than I'd given myself credit for. Every time I thought I was in over my head, I'd found a way to swim. Every challenge that seemed impossible had turned out to be just difficult. I opened my laptop and started revising our expansion plans. If Hartman Manufacturing wanted to see ambition, I'd show them what real ambition looked like. The Hartman meeting went better than I'd dared to hope. By Thursday of that week, I had a signed contract that would quadruple our revenue over the next 12 months. The catch? I had 30 days to demonstrate we could handle their initial volume requirements, which meant I needed to expand from 5 vehicles to 12, and from 4 drivers to at least 10. In less than a month, I was in full crisis management mode, working 16-hour days to coordinate vehicle purchases, hire and train new drivers, and upgrade our facilities management systems. Maria had practically moved into the warehouse, handling logistics while I dealt with the financial and legal aspects of rapid expansion. It was during this chaos that I received the phone call that changed everything. I was on hold with our insurance company, trying to get coverage for the new vehicles, when my personal phone rang, Dad's number. I almost let it go to voicemail. I didn't have time for family drama, but something made me answer. Hi, Dad. Sarah, I need to talk to you. His voice sounded different, strained. Can you come by the house? Dad, I'm in the middle of... Please, it's important. There was something in his tone that cut through my work-focused tunnel vision. Dad never said please. Not to me, anyway. I'll be there in an hour. The drive to my childhood home in Lakewood gave me time to wonder what this was about. Dad wasn't the type to call family meetings or ask for heart-to-heart conversations. If he wanted to see me urgently, something was wrong. I pulled into the familiar driveway and noticed Marcus's Mustang parked on the street, so this was going to be some kind of family gathering. Great. Dad met me at the door and I was shocked by how he looked. He'd aged years in the months since I'd last seen him. His face was drawn, his shoulders stooped in a way that suggested more than just physical tiredness. Come in, sit down, he said, gesturing toward the living room where Marcus was already waiting on the couch. Looking as confused as I felt, Dad sat heavily in his recliner, the same chair he'd occupied every evening of my childhood, and looked at both of us for a long moment. I need to tell you both something, and I don't know how to make this easy. My stomach dropped. Cancer. Heart disease. Something terminal. The shop is failing, he said quietly. I blinked. That wasn't what I'd expected to hear. Dad had owned Jins Auto Repair for 28 years. It had been his pride and joy, his identity, his retirement plan. He'd built it from nothing, just like I was building Swift Transport Solutions. And it had provided for our family my entire life. What do you mean failing? Marcus asked. I mean, I'm 3 months behind on the lease, 2 months behind on supplier payments, and I've got about 6 weeks before I have to close the doors. Dad's voice was steady, but I could see the cost of this admission in his posture. Dad, why didn't you tell us sooner? I asked. What was I going to say? That I was letting down everyone who depended on me? That after 30 years in business, I couldn't figure out how to compete with these chain shops and mobile mechanics? I understood that feeling better than he knew. The isolation of being responsible for everything, the weight of other people's livelihoods depending on your decisions, the fear that admitting you're struggling means admitting you're failing. How much do you owe? I asked, shifting into problem-solving mode. Dad pulled out a folder of papers. Total debt is about $80,000, but that's not the real problem. The real problem is that the business model isn't working anymore. If I paid off everything tomorrow, I'd be back in the same situation within 6 months. Marcus was looking back and forth between us, clearly out of his depth. Financial crisis management wasn't exactly his strong suit. What about selling the business? I suggested. Who's going to buy a failing auto shop? The building lease is too expensive, the equipment is getting outdated, and most of the customer base has moved on to newer places. I studied the papers he'd handed me. The numbers were worse than he'd let on. This wasn't just a cash flow problem, this was a business that had been slowly dying for years. And Dad had been pouring his personal savings into keeping it alive. Dad, why are you telling? Is this now? He looked uncomfortable. Because I need help, and I don't know where else to turn. I've tried banks, I've tried business loans, I've tried everything I can think of. I'm out of options. The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Dad was asking me for money. The same man who'd given my dream car to my brother without. A second thought was now asking me to bail him out. Part of me wanted to point out the irony. But really looking at him, I saw something I'd never seen before. I saw someone who was afraid. Someone who'd built his identity around being strong and self-sufficient, and was now facing the collapse of everything he'd worked for. I saw myself. 6 months ago, sitting in my apartment wondering if I was worth anything to my family. "How much do you need to keep the doors open?" I asked. "Sarah, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm asking." "How much?" He looked at the papers again. 20,000 would get me current on everything and give me a few months to figure out a longer-term solution. $20,000. 6 months ago, that would have been everything I had. Today, it was less than I'd made in profit last month. "I can do that," I said. Both Dad and Marcus stared at me. "Sarah, that's a lot of money," Marcus said. "It's also a loan, not a gift," I clarified, looking directly at Dad. "Business loan, with terms and a repayment schedule. But there are conditions." Dad straightened up slightly. "What conditions?" "First, you let me look at your books. All of them. I want to understand exactly what's happening with the business and why. Second, you consider my suggestions for turning things around. I'm not going to throw money at a sinking ship, but I will invest in a business that can be saved. And third?" Dad asked, because he knew there was a third. "You make Marcus a partner in the shop." Both of them looked shocked. "Sarah, I don't know anything about running a business," Marcus protested, double quotes. "No, but you know cars and your family. Dad needs help, and you need steady work that's more than just a job. This could be good for both of you." I could see Dad processing. The idea of sharing control of his business was clearly difficult, but so was losing it entirely. "What kind of partnership are you thinking?" he asked slowly. "Sweat equity to start. Marcus works full-time at the shop, learns the business side from you, contributes his labor and ideas toward turning things around. If the business succeeds, he earns a percentage based on his contribution." "And what do you get out of this?" Marcus asked suspiciously. "I get my family back on their feet, and I get a brother who has a real stake in something instead of drifting from job to job." I paused, then added, "And I get a father who maybe starts to see that the daughter he overlooked actually knows what she's doing." Dad was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I'd heard it in years. "Sarah, I owe you an apology, not just for the car, but for not seeing what you were building. I was so worried about Marcus finding his way that I didn't appreciate that you'd already found yours." It wasn't everything I'd wanted to hear from him over the years, but it was a start. "So what do you say?" I asked. "Do we try to save the family business?" Dad looked at Marcus, who nodded slowly. "Yes," Dad said. "But Sarah, if I'm going to take your money and your advice, I need to ask you something." "What? Are you sure you want to tie yourself to us? You've built something amazing without any help from family. Why risk that now?" I thought about the question seriously. Why was I willing to loan Dad money when he never supported my ambitions? Why was I suggesting Marcus as a partner when he'd shown no particular business acumen? The answer surprised me with its simplicity. Because this isn't about the past. It's about who we can be going forward. And because I finally understand something Dad taught me, even if he didn't mean to. What's that? Family isn't about who gets the most support. It's about who's still standing when everyone else needs help. Dad wiped his eyes, and I realized. I'd never seen him cry before. We spent the next 3 hours going through his books, identifying problems, and brainstorming solutions. By the time I left, we had a preliminary plan for modernizing the shop, attracting new customers, and giving Marcus a path toward becoming a real partner in the business. Driving home, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. I felt like part of a family again. Not because I'd proven myself worthy of their attention, but because I'd realized I didn't need their validation to know my own worth. The next morning, I called Maria to let her know I'd be out of the office for a few hours. "Family business," I explained. "Everything okay?" "Actually, yes. For the first time in a long time, everything's going to be okay." 2 years later, I stood in the showroom of Swift Transport Solutions' new headquarters, watching through the glass walls as my team coordinated shipments across 3 states. We'd grown from that single beat-up van to a fleet of 43 vehicles, with contracts ranging from same-day delivery to cross-country logistics. The Hartman manufacturing deal had been the catalyst, but it was the culture we'd built, professional, reliable, always growing, that had sustained our expansion. Maria was now vice president of operations, overseeing a team of 12 administrative staff. We had regional managers in Colorado Springs, Albuquerque, and Kansas City. Next month, we were opening our first California facility, but the growth I was most proud of wasn't measured in vehicles or revenue. Through the showroom window, I could see Marcus pulling up in one of our newer trucks, back from a delivery run to Cheyenne. He'd quit the auto shop 8 months ago, but not because things weren't working out. He'd quit because Chun's Auto Repair had become successful enough that Dad could hire 2 full-time mechanics and a business manager, freeing Marcus to pursue something he'd discovered he was actually good at: long-haul logistics. Marcus had approached me 6 months ago with a proposal. He wanted to start a specialized division of Swift Transport focused on oversized cargo and long-distance routes. He'd done his research, understood the market opportunity, and presented a comprehensive business plan. It was the first time in his life that he'd taken initiative on something that mattered. I'd approved the expansion with Marcus as division manager. His section of the business was now generating 15% of our total revenue, and he was talking about adding specialized equipment for construction and industrial transport. Dad's transformation had been even more dramatic. The loan I'd given him had been repaid within 18 months, but more importantly, the experience of almost losing everything had forced him to rethink how he ran his business. He'd embraced modern marketing, upgraded his equipment, and started offering services that the chain shops couldn't match. Chun's Auto Repair was now known throughout the Denver metro area for high-end restoration work and performance modifications. Last month, he'd been featured in a local business magazine as an example of family businesses that had successfully adapted to changing markets. But the conversation I was remembering today had happened just yesterday, over dinner at Dad's house, our first family dinner in years. "Sarah," Dad had said, setting down his coffee cup, "I need to tell you something I should have said a long time ago. Marcus and I had both looked up from our dessert. I was wrong about the car. I was wrong about a lot of things." Dad's voice was steady, but I could see the weight of what he was saying. "I thought helping Marcus meant giving him things. I thought you were strong enough that you didn't need help. I was wrong on both counts." "Dad, you don't need to." I started. "Yes, I do. You saved our family business, but more than that, you showed both of us what real success looks like. Not getting things handed to you, but building something that matters. Not being taken care of, but taking care of others." He'd reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a set of car keys. "I know it's not the same one, and I know you don't need it now, but I wanted you to have this." The keys were attached to a key ring with a small blue Mustang GT emblem. "Dad, what? It's parked outside." "Same model, same color as the one I gave Marcus. I bought it 3 months ago, and I've been waiting for the right time to give it to you." I'd looked out the window to see a pristine 2023 Mustang GT in that familiar deep blue metallic, parked in the driveway. "Dad, I can't accept. It's not charity, Sarah. It's recognition. Recognition of what you've accomplished, and an apology for how long it took me to see it." I'd taken the keys, but more importantly, I'd seen something in Dad's eyes that I'd been waiting for my entire adult life: respect. Not the patronizing approval of someone who thought I was doing okay for a girl, but the genuine respect of one business owner for another. Now, standing in my office, I could see that Mustang in the executive parking space outside. I drove it sometimes, but honestly, I preferred my Tesla Model S. It was more practical for client meetings and long trips. But I kept the Mustang because it represented something important: proof that success isn't about getting what you want when you want it, but about building something so substantial that what you once wanted becomes just a small part of something much bigger. My phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer Kim, who'd gone from being my business lawyer to being my general counsel as Swift Transport Solutions grew into a regional powerhouse. "Sarah, got the contracts back from Phoenix. They're ready to sign. When do you want to announce the Arizona expansion? Arizona would be our fifth state. From that single delivery van to a multi-state logistics empire in less than 3 years. Each expansion had been carefully planned, properly funded, and built on the foundation of excellent service and reliable operations. I was about to respond when Marcus knocked on my office door. "Hey, boss, got a minute?" I waved him in. He was still getting used to the family dynamics of working for his sister, but he'd found a professional balance that worked for both of us. "What's up?" "I wanted to run something by you. I've been talking to some of the construction companies we serve, and there's a real opportunity for specialized transport of prefab building components. It would require some new equipment, and probably 2 or 3 dedicated drivers, but the margins are excellent." I listened to his proposal, which was well-researched and financially sound. This was the Marcus I'd hoped would emerge, someone who saw opportunities instead of just problems. Someone who took initiative instead of waiting for things to happen to him. "Put together a formal proposal," I said. "Include equipment costs, staffing needs, and projected ROI over the first 2 years. If the numbers work, we'll consider it for the next budget cycle. Already working on it. Should have it to you by Friday." After he left, I walked over to the window that looked out over our operations floor. 43 vehicles, 68 employees, and contracts that kept growing every quarter. Swift Transport Solutions had become exactly what I'd envisioned. During those late nights in my studio apartment, planning for a future I wasn't sure I could build, but the real success wasn't the business metrics. It was the fact that I'd created something that could support not just my own dreams, but my family's dreams too. Marcus had found his purpose managing the specialized transport division. Dad had rediscovered his passion for automotive work. And I had built something that proved to myself and everyone else that being overlooked doesn't mean being worthless. It just means you have to work a little harder to make sure no one can overlook you again. My assistant knocked and entered. "Sarah, your 3 o'clock is here. The investors from Portland?" "Right. The meeting I've been preparing for all week." A private equity group that specialized in logistics companies had reached out about potential partnership opportunities. Not because Swift Transport Solutions was struggling, quite the opposite. They were interested because we become the kind of regional success story that could scale nationally with the right backing. "Send them to conference room A. I'll be there in 5 minutes." I took a moment to look at myself in the mirror behind my desk. Professional blazer, minimal jewelry. Hair pulled back in a style that said I was serious about business. At 34, I'd learned that first impressions mattered, especially when you were a woman in a male-dominated industry, but I'd also learned that competence spoke louder than appearance, and results spoke loudest of all. The meeting went well. The investors' 3 partners from Portland Pacific Capital had done their homework. They knew our revenue growth, our market position, our client retention rates. They also knew that we'd achieved this growth without outside investment, which made us unusual in the logistics industry. "Most companies your size have taken on debt or equity partners by now," said Rebecca Chun, the lead partner. "What's kept you bootstrapped?" "Control," I answered honestly. "I've seen too many businesses lose their identity when they bring in outside money too early. I wanted to prove the model worked before I considered scaling it beyond what I could manage directly. And now I'm ready to consider partnerships that can help us expand without compromising the culture we've built." We spent 2 hours discussing growth strategies, market opportunities, and the kind of partnership that might make sense. They weren't pushy or demanding. They clearly understood that they were courting us, not the other way around. After they left, I sat in the conference room for a few minutes, processing what had just happened. 3 years ago, I'd been begging banks for a small business loan. Now, sophisticated investors were flying in from other states to discuss injecting millions of dollars into my company. The irony wasn't lost on me. I built something so successful that I had to decide whether to stay small and maintain complete control, or grow large enough to potentially lose some of that control. My phone rang. "Dad." "Hey, sweetheart, how was your big investor meeting?" "Interesting. They're serious about partnership, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to give up decision-making authority." "Sounds familiar. Dad said with a chuckle. I had the same conversation with myself when I was thinking about making Marcus a partner. Sometimes, sharing control is the only way to keep growing. How's the shop doing? Better than ever. Marcus's replacement is working out well, and we just landed a contract to do warranty work for one of the luxury car dealerships. Your brother's division is keeping me busy with referrals too. It was still surreal to hear Dad talk about Marcus's success in terms of his own business acumen rather than just luck or family connections. The pride in his voice was unmistakable, but it wasn't the hollow pride of a parent making excuses for a struggling child. It was the genuine respect of one businessman acknowledging another's achievements. There was a weight to his words that hadn't been there before, a recognition that Marcus had earned his position through competence rather than charity. The conversation had shifted from the patronizing tone Dad used to take when discussing Marcus's various failed ventures to the kind of professional dialogue he might have with any successful entrepreneur. But that was what had changed for all of us. We'd stopped defining ourselves by our relationships to each other and started defining ourselves by what we could accomplish. The old family dynamics, where Marcus was the charming disappointment, and I was the reliable workhorse who could be counted on but never celebrated, had dissolved into something more honest and substantial. We were no longer playing the roles we'd been assigned in childhood. We were creating new identities based on our actual capabilities and achievements. The shift had been gradual but profound. Family dinners no longer revolved around Mom and Dad, anxiously asking Marcus about his latest job prospects while taking my steady employment for granted. Instead, we found ourselves discussing market trends, business strategies, and industry challenges. Marcus would share insights from his work in logistics. Dad would talk about innovations in automotive repair, and they'd both turn to me for perspective on scaling operations and managing growth, not because I was family, but because my experience running Swift Transport Solutions had given me expertise worth consulting. Sarah, I wanted to ask you something. Sure. I shifted the phone to my other ear, already anticipating another update about the auto shop's quarterly numbers or a question about one of his suppliers. These conversations had become a regular part of our relationship, Dad seeking my input on business decisions, treating me as a peer rather than just his daughter. Your mother and I are thinking about taking that trip to Italy we've been talking about for 20 years. With the shop doing well and Marcus settled in his career, it feels like the right time. But I wanted to make sure you'd be okay with me being out of the country for 3 weeks. I almost laughed out loud at the irony, but there was something deeply moving about the question that stopped me. 3 years ago, Dad wouldn't have thought to ask my opinion about his travel plans, wouldn't have considered that his business decisions might affect mine, wouldn't have viewed me as someone whose input carried weight in the family's larger strategy. Back then, I was the daughter who handled her own problems efficiently and quietly, never needing attention or causing drama. Reliable to the point of being invisible. Now he was checking with me like I was a business partner whose judgment mattered, whose approval was worth seeking. The shift in his tone, the careful way he'd phrased the question, it all spoke to a fundamental change in how he saw me. And more importantly, how he saw himself in relation to my success. He wasn't just asking for permission. He was acknowledging that we were interconnected as business owners in the same community, that his decisions could have implications for my operations. Dad, you should absolutely take that trip. You've earned it. And he had not just the vacation, but the peace of mind that came with knowing his children were thriving independently, that the investments he'd made in our education and character had paid dividends in ways he'd never expected. How long has it been since you and Mom took more than a long weekend together? Too long. Your mother's been patient with my excuses, but she deserves to see Florence and Rome without me worrying about leaving the shop for more than a few days. She's been clipping articles about Italian gardens and Renaissance art for years, saving them in a folder like she was preparing for an exam. I could picture Mom with her carefully organized travel folder, the same methodical approach she brought to everything from meal planning to holiday preparations. The thought of her finally getting to see the places she'd dreamed about for decades filled me with a warmth that surprised me with its intensity. I never thought I'd be in a position to take 3 weeks off, but having good people in place makes all the difference. His voice carried a note of wonder, as if he was still discovering this truth about delegation and trust. I used to think that if I wasn't there personally overseeing every repair, every customer interaction, everything would fall apart. But my team has shown me that good systems and trained people can maintain quality even when the boss is away. Yes, it does. I understood exactly what he meant. The luxury of knowing that your business could function without your constant oversight wasn't just about having competent employees. It was about having built systems robust enough to maintain standards, cultivated relationships deep enough to sustain themselves, and created a culture where people took pride in their work regardless of who was watching. It was also about overcoming the control issues that drove so many small business owners to micromanage themselves into exhaustion. Learning to trust others with the enterprise you'd built from nothing required a level of confidence and security that came only from genuine success, not just financial success, but the deeper satisfaction of knowing you'd created something larger than yourself. After we hung up, I walked back to my office and looked out at the operations floor again, seeing it with fresh eyes after Dad's comment about good people. The late afternoon shift was in full swing, and the organized chaos of a well-run logistics operation unfolded below me. Like a carefully choreographed performance. My good people were handling the daily logistics that kept Swift Transport Solutions running smoothly with an efficiency that would have seemed impossible 3 years ago when I was trying to do everything myself. Maria was coordinating with our new Kansas City office, her voice carrying across the floor as she worked through scheduling conflicts with her characteristic blend of firmness and diplomacy. She'd become more than just my assistant. She was essentially my operations manager, someone who understood the business well enough to make decisions in my absence and had earned the respect of every driver and client she worked with. Our head dispatcher, Tom, was routing drivers for maximum efficiency, his years of experience evident in the way he could juggle 20 variables simultaneously: weather conditions, traffic patterns, driver availability, fuel costs, delivery deadlines, customer preferences, and still find optimal solutions that saved money while maintaining service quality. His desk was covered with maps, route calculations, and driver schedules, but he carried most of the critical information in his head, built up through years of pattern recognition and problem solving, and our customer service team was handling client calls with the professionalism and attention to detail that had built our reputation for reliability in an industry where reliability was everything. Jenny, our lead customer service representative, had developed relationships with our regular clients that went beyond mere transactions. She knew which customers needed extra communication during complex shipments, which ones preferred text updates over phone calls, and which ones could be counted on for referrals when they were satisfied with our service. The scene below me represented something I barely dared to imagine when I first started the company. A business that operated effectively without requiring my constant presence. A team of professionals who took ownership of their roles and contributed to our success through their individual expertise rather than just following orders. I could take 3 weeks off too if I wanted to. The business was no longer dependent on me being personally involved in every decision, no longer required my direct oversight to maintain the standards that had made us successful. That realization was both liberating and terrifying. Liberating because it meant I'd built something sustainable, something that could outlive my daily management and continue serving customers effectively. Terrifying because it meant I had to figure out what came next, what new challenges to pursue when the original dream had been so thoroughly realized. The fear wasn't about the business failing. It was about success itself, about reaching a point where the goals that had driven me for years were no longer sufficient to provide direction and purpose. What did you do when you'd accomplished everything you'd set out to do? How did you find new mountains to climb when you'd already reached the summit you'd been aiming for? My computer chimed with a new email notification, pulling me back from my contemplation. A message from Marcus with the subject line, Specialized Transport Proposal, Draft 1. The timing felt almost symbolic, as if the universe was answering My question about what came next by presenting a new challenge, a new opportunity to grow and expand beyond what I'd already achieved. I opened it to find a comprehensive business plan for expanding our construction, transport services that immediately impressed me with its thoroughness and attention to detail. This wasn't a casual suggestion or a rough idea. It was a fully developed proposal that demonstrated serious research and careful planning. The market analysis was complete with competitor research and pricing strategies, showing that Marcus had identified specific gaps in the local market where Swift Transport Solutions could establish a competitive advantage. He'd researched everything from the largest construction companies in our service area to smaller contractors who regularly needed specialized transport but couldn't justify maintaining their own fleet of specialized vehicles. Equipment specifications showed he'd researched everything from crane requirements to specialized trailer configurations, with detailed cost analyses for both purchasing and leasing options. He'd even included maintenance schedules and operational requirements, demonstrating that he understood the complexities of running specialized equipment rather than just the potential profits. Staffing projections accounted for both initial training costs and long-term growth potential with realistic timelines for hiring and developing the specialized skills required for oversized load transport. He'd researched certification requirements, insurance considerations, and regulatory compliance issues that would affect our ability to operate in this market segment. Financial models projected realistic timelines for breaking even and achieving profitability with conservative, optimistic, and pessimistic scenarios that showed he understood the risks as well as the opportunities. The numbers were backed by solid research rather than wishful thinking, and the projections accounted for seasonal variations in construction activity and potential economic downturns. It was the kind of thorough, professional proposal I expect from a seasoned business consultant with years of industry experience, not from someone who'd been drifting between jobs and struggling to find direction just 3 years ago. The transformation in Marcus's approach to work and planning was evident in every section of the document. The depth of research was remarkable and showed a level of commitment that went far beyond what I'd expected. He'd identified specific construction companies in our service area that regularly needed specialized transport, had reached out to equipment manufacturers to understand lead times and financing options, had even contacted insurance providers to understand the unique coverage requirements for oversized load transport. He'd spoken with drivers who specialized in heavy haul transport to understand the skills and experience required, and had researched training programs that could prepare our existing team for the additional responsibilities. Every aspect of the proposal showed careful thought and genuine preparation. This wasn't someone asking for a favor or looking for an easy opportunity. This was a professional presenting a legitimate business case based on thorough research and realistic planning. The proposal also included a detailed implementation timeline that broke down the expansion into manageable phases, starting with pilot projects to test our capabilities and build relationships with construction companies, then gradually expanding our capacity and service offerings as we proved ourselves in the market. It was exactly the kind of cautious, methodical approach that had made Swift Transport Solutions successful in our core business. At the bottom of the email, he'd written a personal note that made me pause and reconsider everything I thought I knew about Marcus's relationship with work and success. Sarah, I know this is a big ask, and I know you've already given me more opportunities than I probably deserved based on my track record before joining Swift Transport Solutions. But I want you to know that working for this company has been the first time in my life that I felt like I was contributing to something important, something that matters beyond just paying my bills and getting by from month to month. 4 years I bounced from job to job, always finding reasons why each position wasn't quite right. Why each company didn't appreciate my contributions. Why each boss didn't understand my potential. I realize now that I was the problem, not because I lacked ability, but because I never found work that challenged me to develop that ability into something meaningful. Working at Swift Transport Solutions has shown me what I'm capable of when I'm committed to something larger than myself. The research for this proposal took months, But it never felt like work because I was invested in the outcome. I was building something rather than just completing tasks. Whatever you decide about this proposal, thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. You saw potential in me that I couldn't see, and you gave me the chance to discover what I was actually capable of when I applied myself to something meaningful. You've shown me that success isn't about natural talent or luck, it's about finding something worth working for and then doing the work. I leaned back in my chair, remembering the conversation we'd had 6 months ago when he'd first approached me about joining the company full-time. He'd been nervous, almost apologetic, acutely aware that he was asking his sister for a favor that could easily be seen as nepotism. His resume had been a patchwork of short-term positions and incomplete projects, and he'd known that his employment history didn't inspire confidence, but he'd also been determined to prove himself, to show that he could be more than just the family disappointment, more than the charming underachiever who coasted on personality while everyone else did the real work.
He'd acknowledged his past failures directly and honestly.
Without making excuses or blaming external circumstances, the transformation in his approach to work had been gradual but unmistakable. Where he'd once shown up late and left early at previous jobs, he now stayed after hours to understand complex logistics problems, often working alongside Tom to learn the intricacies of route optimization and driver scheduling. Where he'd once avoided responsibility and looked for the easiest path through any challenge, he now actively sought out problems that pushed his capabilities and required him to develop new skills. The change wasn't just in his work habits. It was in his entire relationship with accomplishment, with the satisfaction that came from building something significant rather than just getting by. He'd discovered that he actually enjoyed being held to high standards. That meeting challenging expectations was more fulfilling than skating by with minimal effort. More importantly, he'd learned to see setbacks and mistakes as learning opportunities rather than reasons to give up or blame others. When he'd made errors in his first few months, and there had been several, he'd responded by analyzing what went wrong, developing systems to prevent similar problems, and taking responsibility for the consequences rather than deflecting blame. The proposal was good, really good. The market research was solid and showed genuine understanding of the industry's needs and competitive dynamics. The financial projections were realistic rather than optimistically inflated, and the implementation timeline was achievable without being overly conservative. If we moved forward with it, we'd be expanding into a niche market with excellent profit margins and relatively little competition, positioning ourselves as specialists in a field where expertise commanded premium pricing, but more than the business case. What impressed me was what the proposal represented. Marcus taking ownership of his professional future, identifying an opportunity that aligned with our company's capabilities, and developing a comprehensive plan to capitalize on it. This wasn't someone asking for a handout or a make-work position. This was a legitimate business partnership proposal from someone who'd earned the right to be taken seriously. The specialized transport market was indeed underserved in our region, and Marcus had identified specific gaps where Swift Transport Solutions could establish a competitive advantage. Construction companies regularly needed to move oversized equipment, prefabricated structures, and specialized materials that required permits, specialized trailers, and experienced drivers. Most of these companies relied on national firms that charged premium prices and often had limited availability. During peak construction seasons, Marcus's proposal came at a time when the company was ready for its next step. Seeing the care and depth he put into the plan, I realized he had finally found something of his own to build within the very structure I had created. I approved the idea immediately, knowing this decision would change not only the course of his career, but also the future of Swift Transport Solutions. Entrusting him with the leadership of a new division was more than a strategic move, it was a vote of confidence, a recognition of how much he had grown. It was his chance to prove to himself and to others that he could lead and succeed on his own merit, not through charity or family ties. Watching that transformation was as rewarding as any achievement of my own. As I reflected on that moment, I realized how much my motivation had changed over the years. I started this journey trying to prove my worth to a family that underestimated me. But over time, building something meaningful and creating opportunities for others I had done for Marcus game to mean so much more. The blue Mustang I drive today is no longer a symbol of craving recognition, but of freedom earned through effort, of success rooted in responsibility and vision. The greatest satisfaction doesn't come from what I've achieved for myself, but from what I've helped others achieve. And in that moment, approving Marcus's project and seeing him ready to lead, I understood the true value of everything I've built.